I am 24 years old, and today is the day that could change my destiny. I am at the prestigious Bogotá Conservatory of Musical Arts, a place that always seemed unattainable to me. My heart beats with a mix of hope and nervousness as I observe the majestic architecture around me. I came here to audition for the Golden Legacy Scholarship, an exclusive program for emerging talents. The call for applications clearly stated, no preferences based on origin, race, or social status, only pure talent matters. Those words resonated in my soul, giving me the courage to show up. I grew up in a humble neighborhood of the capital, where music was my refuge, my escape. I learned to play the violin with a borrowed instrument, practicing for hours, imagining this very moment. My grandmother always told me that my music had a special soul, a rhythm that came from far away. Upon entering the waiting room, I found myself among other aspirants. They were mostly young people from affluent families, with impeccable instruments and an innate confidence. I felt a pang of insecurity, but I clung to the promise of the application. My name is Sofía, and my violin is my voice. I carry with me not only my talent, but also the hopes of my family and my entire community. This is not just a personal dream. It is an opportunity to prove that art knows no barriers. The air was thick with anticipation, and each aspirant reviewed their sheet music with palpable concentration. I, on the other hand, closed my eyes for a moment, trying to calm my breathing. I remembered every note, every emotion I wanted to convey. The audition room was imposing, with a polished wooden stage and a grand piano. In the back, a long table where the judges sat, respected figures in the world of Colombian classical music. They were the Valderrama family, the founders of the Conservatory. When my name was called, I walked to the center of the stage, feeling the weight of each step. The spotlights blinded me a bit at first, but then I focused on the judges' faces. There were 3 of them, 2 older men and an elegant woman. I bowed to them, my violin under my arm. My dark skin contrasted with the paleness of their faces and the formality of their suits. I felt their gazes fixed on me, evaluating me from head to toe. The head judge, Mr. Ricardo Valderrama, gestured for me to begin. I took a deep breath, placed the violin on my shoulder, and the bow on the strings. It was my moment to speak, not with words, but with melody. I began to play a classical piece, but I infused it with my own spirit, my own cadence. My grandmother always said that music must be felt, and I felt every note, every vibration. It was my story, my struggle, my hope. As I played, I noticed the judges' expressions changing. It was no longer just a technical evaluation. It seemed they were truly listening. I strived to give my best, to make my violin sing with all its might. I finished the piece with a final note that resonated in the silence of the room. I slowly lowered the bow, my chest rising and falling. I looked at the judges, awaiting their verdict, my heart pounding in my throat. The silence stretched for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Mr. Valderrama cleared his throat. "Thank you, young lady," he said in a voice that revealed nothing. "We will let you know our decision in the coming days." I left the stage with a bittersweet feeling. I had given my all, but their faces had revealed no emotion. I wondered if my talent had been enough, or if there was something else that didn't fit their expectations. The following days were a torture of impatience. Every time my phone rang, I jumped, expecting the call from the conservatory. I tried to keep myself busy, but my mind kept returning to that audition room. My grandmother, Doña Clara, saw my anxiety. "Have faith, my child," she would say, stroking my hair. "Your music is a gift from the ancestors, and no one can ignore a gift like that." Her words were a balm to my restless soul. The other aspirants I met at the audition began to receive calls. Some were accepted, others rejected. I remained in limbo, feeling hope slowly fading with each passing day without news. I started to question everything. Was I good enough? Was my violin not sophisticated enough? Perhaps my background, despite what the call for application stated, did matter more than I thought? Doubts nested in my mind. One day, while at the market with my grandmother, I saw one of the aspirants, a young man with blonde hair and light eyes, celebrating with his family. "I got into the Valderrama Conservatory," he shouted with joy. I felt a knot in my stomach. That night I couldn't sleep. The words from the application, "no preferences," sounded hollow in my head. I began to think that perhaps, just perhaps, my skin color had been a factor, despite all the promises of equality. I felt frustrated and disillusioned. I had placed all my hopes on that scholarship, on that opportunity to transcend. The idea that my talent wasn't enough, or that something else had disqualified me, was hard to accept. My grandmother found me crying in the kitchen. She hugged me tightly. "Don't give up, Sofía," she whispered. "Sometimes doors close so that even bigger windows can open. The artist's path is long and has many detours." I decided not to sit idly by. If the Valderrama Conservatory didn't want me, I would look for other options. I started researching other schools, other scholarships, although none had the prestige or the promise of golden legacy. Still, the feeling of having been ignored persisted. It was as if my presence in that audition room had been invisible to them, despite having played with all my heart. That idea hurt me deeply. A few weeks later, I received a letter from the conservatory. My heart skipped a beat. I opened it with trembling hands, awaiting the news. It was a rejection letter, formal and concise, without giving specific reasons. "We appreciate your interest and participation. Unfortunately, you have not been selected for the Golden Legacy Scholarship on this occasion." The words blurred before my eyes. It was the final blow to my dream. I sat in silence, feeling the weight of disappointment. I had believed in their words, in their promise of no preferences. But when they saw me, the black daughter was ignored. Bitterness settled in my chest. My grandmother found me with the letter in my hand. She said nothing, just hugged me again. Her silence was more eloquent than any words, sharing my pain and indignation. She knew how much this meant to me. I decided that although it hurt, I would not stop. My music was a part of me, and I would keep playing, keep finding my way. Perhaps this rejection was just a test, a detour on the long path my grandmother had warned me about. One afternoon, while practicing in a park near my house, an elderly woman approached me. She had white hair pulled back in a bun, and lively eyes that observed me with curiosity. I paused, a little surprised by her presence. "What a beautiful melody, young lady," she said in a soft but firm voice. "Your violin sings with soul. Where did you learn to play like that?" Her question caught me off guard, as most people just walked by. I briefly told her my story, my passion for music, and my recent disappointment with the Valderrama Conservatory. She listened attentively, nodding occasionally, without interrupting me. Her gaze was understanding. "Art is not limited to elegant halls or grand surnames," the old woman commented. "True art is born from the heart and resonates in the spirit. Have you heard of the ancestral string?" I had never heard that term. She explained that it was an ancient, almost forgotten Afro-Colombian musical tradition, passed down from generation to generation. "It's a way of playing that connects with our deepest roots," she said. She invited me to her house, a small dwelling filled with ancient musical instruments and faded photographs. She showed me a different violin, more rustic, with intricate carvings. "This is an ancestral string violin," she revealed. She explained that her family had been guardians of this tradition for centuries, but that modernity and discrimination had caused it to almost disappear. "Many considered it black people's music, without value," she sighed. She asked me to play something on that violin. At first, I felt strange, different from my usual instrument. But as my fingers moved, I felt a deep connection, as if the instrument was speaking to me. The old woman, who introduced herself as Doña Elena, told me that my way of playing was unique, that I had the spark of the ancestral string. "It's not just technique, Sofía," she said. "It's the history, the pain, and the joy of our people in every note." I spent the next few weeks visiting Doña Elena. She taught me not only new melodies, but also the history behind each one, the culture, the resilience of her people. It was a musical and spiritual education. I realized that the music she taught me was different from the classical music I had studied. It was more rhythmic, more visceral, but also incredibly complex and emotional. It was music that told stories. Doña Elena encouraged me to fuse my classical training with the ancestral string. "You don't have to choose, Sofía," she told me. "Your art can be a bridge between worlds, a voice that unites the old and the new." This new path gave me renewed purpose. I no longer felt ignored, I felt discovered. My music was evolving, finding a deeper, more authentic identity that resonated with who I was. The disappointment with the Valderrama Conservatory was still there, but now I saw it in a new light. Perhaps it wasn't the place for me, because my destiny was elsewhere, one that connected me to something much larger and more significant. Doña Elena told me about a little-known annual event, the Festival of Hidden Talents, which celebrated less conventional artistic expressions in Colombia. It's a place where the soul of the people manifests itself, she told me. At first, I hesitated. I was used to formal stages, not an outdoor festival with a diverse audience. But Doña Elena insisted, saying it was an opportunity for my music to find its true audience. I decided to participate, bringing with me the ancestral string violin that Doña Elena had lent me. I prepared a piece that fused classical technique with the rhythms and melodies of the Afro-Colombian tradition. On the day of the festival, the atmosphere was vibrant. There were artists of all disciplines, from cumbia dancers to urban poets. I felt a little intimidated, but also excited by the diversity of talent. When I stepped onto the small, makeshift stage, the afternoon sun fell upon me. I took a deep breath and began to play. At first, the audience was distracted, chatting and laughing. But as my music soared, something changed. People began to pay attention. My violin told a story of resilience, of joy, of the struggle and beauty of my heritage. I felt the connection with the audience, a connection I had never experienced in a formal concert hall. Their eyes were fixed on me, their heads swaying to the rhythm of the music. It was magical. I finished the piece with an explosion of energy, and the audience erupted in applause and cheers. I had never received such an ovation. I felt a wave of emotion, a validation that went beyond any scholarship. Among the crowd, I saw Doña Elena smiling, her eyes full of pride. She had been right. This was my audience. This was the place where my music could flourish without restrictions or judgments. That night, I felt that I had found my voice, my identity as an artist. I was not the ignored black daughter. I was Sofía, the violinist who fused worlds, who honored her roots and her talent. The festival experience gave me a confidence I didn't know I had. I realized that I didn't need the approval of the elite to be a valuable artist. My art was authentic and resonated on its own. I started receiving invitations to play at other local events, in cultural centers, and at community gatherings. My name, Sofía, began to be synonymous with music that moved and united people. My grandmother, Doña Clara, was beaming. "I told you, my child," she repeated. "Your path is unique. You don't need to follow others. You are your own legacy." Her words felt truer than ever. The bitterness over the rejection from the Valderrama Conservatory began to dissipate. Now I understood that, even if they hadn't seen me, the world did, and embraced me with open arms. My music was free. A week after the festival, I received a call from a local journalist, Miss Camila Rojas. She told me she had been at the festival and that my performance had deeply moved her. "Sofía," Camila said, "your music is powerful. I would like to write an article about you, about your story, and about the ancestral string. I believe people need to know your talent and this tradition." At first, I felt a little overwhelmed. I had never been the center of attention in that way. But Doña Elena encouraged me, saying it was an opportunity to make the music of our ancestors known. Camila interviewed me for hours at my house, in the park where I practiced, and with Doña Elena. She wanted to know every detail of my journey, my struggles, and my passion for the violin. I told her about my audition at the Valderrama Conservatory and my disappointment. I did so not with resentment, but as part of my journey, an experience that had led me to discover the ancestral string. Camila listened attentively, taking meticulous notes. She asked me about the feeling of being ignored, and how that had impacted my perception of my own worth. I was honest with her. The article was published in a major Bogotá newspaper with a photo of me playing the ancestral string violin. The headline read, "Sofía, the voice that rescues Colombia's forgotten musical legacy." It was a surreal moment to see my face and my story in the newspaper. My family and neighbors were ecstatic, celebrating every word, every phrase that spoke of my talent and our culture. The article not only highlighted my musical ability, but also the richness of the ancestral string, presenting it as a cultural treasure that deserved to be recognized and valued by all. The public response was overwhelming. I received messages of support from everywhere, from people moved by my story and by the beauty of the music I represented. Even some people from the classical music world contacted me, expressing their admiration for my fusion of styles. It was a recognition I had never imagined achieving. The article also generated renewed interest in the ancestral string. Doña Elena was thrilled to see that her family's tradition was being rediscovered and appreciated by a new generation. I felt validated in a way that the Conservatory scholarship could never have achieved. My worth did not depend on the approval of an institution, but on the resonance of my art with the people. This article was a turning point. I was no longer just a violinist. I had become an ambassador of a culture, a voice for those who had been silenced or ignored. Days after the article was published, I received a call from the Bogotá Conservatory of Musical Arts. My heart stopped for a second. It was Mr. Ricardo Valderrama, the head judge from my audition. "Miss Sofía," his voice said, now sounding less formal and more cautious. "We have read the article about you. Your story and your talent have deeply impressed us." He invited me to a personal meeting at the conservatory. He did not mention the Golden Legacy scholarship or my previous audition. He only expressed his desire to discuss your music and your future. I consulted with Doña Elena. She advised me to go. "Sometimes, recognition comes through unexpected paths," she told me. "Go with your head held high, Sofía. You are no longer the same person who auditioned months ago." I went to the conservatory with a mix of curiosity and caution. The same place that had rejected me was now opening its doors to me in a different way. I wondered what they wanted from me. Mr. Valderrama received me in his office, which was even more opulent than I had imagined. He was accompanied by the other two judges from the audition, who greeted me with unusual formality. "Miss Sofía," Mr. Valderrama began, "we have followed your journey since the festival. Your interpretation of the ancestral string is fascinating. We had not seen anything like it." They asked me about the ancestral string, its history, its techniques. I spoke to them with passion, sharing everything Doña Elena had taught me, the richness and depth of that tradition. I noticed that their expressions were different now. There was a mix of awe and perhaps a little regret in their eyes. It seemed they were seeing something in me that they had not perceived before. Mr. Valderrama stood up and walked to a bookshelf filled with ancient books. He pulled out a leather-bound volume with strange symbols on the cover. "This is our Golden Legacy," he said. He explained that the Golden Legacy was not just a scholarship, but a program to find the guardian of a secret musical tradition of their family, one that had been lost over time. "Our family has been the guardian of an ancestral form of music, a fusion of indigenous and African rhythms that was believed to be extinct," he revealed. "We were looking for someone with the essence of that music." They showed me ancient sheet music with annotations in a language I didn't recognize, but whose melodies felt strangely familiar. It was as if I had heard them before in my dreams. Mr. Valderrama looked at me intently. The Golden Legacy scholarship was not just for a technical musician, but for someone who could feel and revive this music. "When you auditioned, we didn't see that." "We didn't see you because we were looking in the wrong place," added Mrs. Valderrama, the elegant judge. "We were looking for someone who fit our old ideas of what a master should be." Mr. Valderrama continued to explain that the Golden Legacy tradition originated centuries ago with their ancestors who came to Colombia. A part of their lineage had mixed with Afro-Indigenous communities. Over time, that branch of the family, and with it, the music, was lost to history, he said. "We, the Valderramas of today, have preserved only the European part of our musical legacy." He showed me an ancient family tree, and on one of the oldest branches, I saw names that seemed familiar to me, names that my grandmother, Dona Clara, sometimes mentioned in her family stories. "We have been looking for someone who could connect with our family's own ancestral string," Mr. Valderrama explained. "We thought it was a legend, but your music has brought it back." I realized the incredible irony. They had looked for someone who fit their preconceived image, ignoring the black daughter who stood before them, unaware that I held the key to their own lost legacy. Mr. Valderrama extended the ancient book towards me. "We believe that you, Sofía, are the daughter we were looking for. Not a biological daughter, but the spiritual heir of our true ancestral string." He explained that the ancestral string that Doña Elena had taught me was, in fact, the same musical tradition that his family had lost. My grandmother, Doña Clara, and Doña Elena were descendants of that lost branch. The revelation left me breathless. My grandmother and Doña Elena were part of the same family line as the Valderramas, but through a branch that had kept the Afro-Indigenous tradition alive in secrecy. Our call for applications said no preferences, Mrs. Valderrama said with a tone of sincere regret. And we meant it, but our own unconscious biases blinded us. They offered me not only the Golden Legacy scholarship but also a position as a researcher and teacher at the Conservatory, with the mission of reviving and teaching the ancestral string. It was an overwhelming offer, one that completely changed my perspective on my initial rejection. They had not ignored me out of malice, but out of a blindness caused by their own expectations and prejudices. I told them I needed time to think, to talk with my grandmother and Doña Elena. I left the conservatory feeling dazed, with the weight of a family history far more complex than I had imagined. Upon arriving home, my grandmother was waiting for me. I told her everything, the revelation of the family connection, the story of the Golden Legacy, and the Valderrama's offer. Her eyes filled with tears. I always knew there was something special about our music, Sofía, my grandmother said, her voice trembling. Our ancestors sang those melodies in secret, to keep our history alive. My grandmother, Doña Clara, confirmed the story of the family connection. She told me that her great-grandparents, descendants of Africans and indigenous peoples, had worked for the Valderrama family centuries ago. One of the Valderrama daughters had fallen in love with an Afro-Indigenous musician and had eloped with him, taking with her the secrets of the ancestral string. That branch of the family had kept the tradition alive in clandestinity. That's why the music called to you, Sofía, my grandmother said. It was in your blood, in your spirit. You are the daughter they lost, the one who returns to unite what was separated. Doña Elena, upon hearing the news, was also moved. Our elders always spoke of a branch of the family that had gotten lost among the wealthy, she said. We never imagined that the Golden Legacy was our own legacy. The Valderrama's offer was not just a professional opportunity, it was an opportunity to heal a historical wound, to unite two branches of the same family and two musical traditions. I decided to accept the offer, not for the prestige or the money, but for the chance to honor my ancestors and give voice to music that had been silenced and forgotten for too long. My first day as a teacher at the Valderrama Conservatory was different from my audition. This time, I entered with my head held high, not as an aspirant, but as a bearer of a legacy. Mr. and Mrs. Valderrama introduced me to the students and staff. They spoke of the importance of the ancestral string and how I would be in charge of reviving it at the conservatory. Some students looked at me with curiosity, others with skepticism. I knew I had a great challenge ahead, but I was ready to face it with the same passion I put into my music. My first class was a challenge. The students were accustomed to the rigidity of classical music. I asked them to feel the music, to let their bodies and souls express themselves freely. At first, there was resistance, but little by little, the magic of the ancestral string began to take effect. The rhythms were contagious, the melodies evoked stories, and the students began to loosen up. Seeing young people from different backgrounds connect with this ancestral music was incredibly rewarding. I was building bridges, tearing down walls, just as Doña Elena had told me. The conservatory, which had once seemed cold and elitist, began to transform. The ancestral string gave it new life, a new soul that resonated with the diversity of Colombia. Not everything was easy. Some conservative faculty members and students resisted the inclusion of the ancestral string. They saw it as less academic or too folkloric. I had to defend the richness and complexity of this music, explaining that it was as sophisticated as any symphony, just with a different structure, rooted in oral tradition and emotion. Mr. Valderrama and his wife firmly supported me, reminding everyone of the true origin of the Golden Legacy and the importance of honoring all branches of their musical history. We organized workshops and conferences to educate the conservatory community about the history and meaning of the ancestral string. We invited Doña Elena to share her knowledge. Doña Elena, with her wisdom and charisma, became a beloved figure at the conservatory. Her stories and teachings brought the music to life in a way that books could not. Little by little, the resistance diminished. Students who initially doubted became captivated by the energy and authenticity of the ancestral string. The music had an undeniable power. I began to develop a new curriculum that integrated classical music with the ancestral string, creating a unique approach that celebrated the richness of Colombian musical heritage. My grandmother, Doña Clara, would visit me at the conservatory and observe my classes with a proud smile. For her, it was the realization of a dream that had seemed impossible for our family. The transformation of the conservatory was not only musical but also cultural. It became a more inclusive place, where diversity was celebrated and where all voices had a space. Mr. Valderrama confessed that my presence had opened his eyes to his own unconscious prejudices. "We believed we had no preferences, Sofía," he said, "but we didn't know how blind we were." I felt satisfied. Not only had I overcome my own pain and rejection, but I had also helped a prestigious institution recognize and embrace its own history and diversity. The ancestral string was no longer just a forgotten tradition. It was a living force, resonating in the halls of the conservatory, a testament to the power of music to heal and unite. To celebrate the integration of the ancestral string into the curriculum, we decided to organize a special concert in the conservatory's main auditorium. It would be a historic event. The program would include both classical pieces performed by the students and ancestral string compositions, some of them performed by me and Doña Elena. The anticipation was enormous. Tickets sold out in hours. People from all walks of life wanted to witness this unique moment in Bogotá's musical history. On the day of the concert, the auditorium was packed. My family, my friends from the neighborhood, and the Valderrama community were present. It was a mix of worlds uniting through music. When I stepped onto the stage with the ancestral string violin, I felt a different energy. It wasn't the nervousness of an audition, but the excitement of sharing something deeply meaningful. I started with a melody Doña Elena had taught me, an ancestral song that spoke of resilience and hope. My violin sang with a voice that came from the deepest part of my being. Then, the students joined in, fusing their classical instruments with the rhythms of the ancestral string. It was a symphony of cultures, a harmony of the old and the new. The audience was captivated. I could see tears in some people's eyes, smiles in others. The music transcended barriers, touching the heart of every listener. Doña Elena joined me on stage for a final piece, her wisdom and my youth creating a powerful synergy. It was a magical moment, a living testament to the tradition. At the end of the concert, the audience rose to their feet, applauding with an intensity that made the auditorium tremble. The applause was deafening, a recognition of the music and the history. Mr. Valderrama came onto the stage and took the microphone. "Tonight," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "we have witnessed the true essence of the Golden Legacy. Thanks to Sofía, we have rediscovered a vital part of our history," he continued. "She is not only an exceptional teacher, but the guardian of a treasure we thought was lost." I was overwhelmed with emotion. This concert was not just a personal achievement, it was a triumph for the ancestral string, for my community, and for the reconciliation of a history. The concert was a resounding success, not only in Bogotá but nationally and internationally. Media outlets from around the world covered the story of the ancestral string and my role in its resurgence. I was invited to give lectures and perform at prestigious music festivals in other countries. My music, a unique fusion of classical and ancestral, resonated with audiences of all cultures. The Valderrama Conservatory became a global benchmark for musical inclusion and diversity. Its ancestral string program attracted students from everywhere, eager to learn this tradition. Doña Elena and my grandmother, Doña Clara, accompanied me on some of my travels. Seeing them proud, sharing our culture with the world, was the greatest reward of all. I received awards and recognitions for my contribution to music and culture. But the real prize was seeing the ancestral string flourish, inspiring a new generation of artists. Mr. Valderrama and I maintained a relationship of respect and collaboration. He sincerely apologized for his initial blindness, and I thanked him for the opportunity to heal and build. The Valderrama family invested in the creation of a research and preservation center for the ancestral string, ensuring that this tradition would never again be forgotten. My life had completely changed. but I never forgot my roots or the lessons learned. Humility and authenticity remain my guides on this new and exciting path. Music, which was once my personal refuge, had become a global bridge. It united cultures, generations, and healed old wounds, demonstrating its transformative power. I realized that the true legacy was not just the gold of a scholarship, but the intangible richness of a culture, of a history, and of a human being's ability to overcome adversity. 5 years have passed since that historic concert. Today, the Bogotá Conservatory of Musical Arts is a beacon of diversity, with the Ancestral String as one of its cornerstones. I continue to be the director of the Ancestral String program, and my passion for teaching is as strong as my love for performing. Seeing my students discover their own voice is my greatest joy. Doña Elena, though older, remains an invaluable mentor, her wisdom illuminating every step we take. My grandmother, Doña Clara, enjoys every moment, seeing the fruit of our heritage. My music has evolved, incorporating elements of the ancestral string into orchestral and contemporary compositions. I continue to explore new fusions, always honoring my roots. I have founded a nonprofit organization to support young musicians from marginalized communities, ensuring that talent is never ignored due to lack of opportunities or prejudice. Mr. Valderrama, now my colleague and friend, often reflects on our first audition. "How blind we were, Sofía," he tells me. "We thought we were looking for gold, and we had a diamond in front of us." The black daughter, who was ignored, became the cornerstone of a legacy. Not just the golden legacy of the Valderramas, but a much larger legacy, that of inclusion and truth. My story is a testament that true preference is not in skin color or surname, but in the essence of a spirit, in the authenticity of talent, and in the strength of resilience. Every time I play, I feel the presence of my ancestors, of Doña Elena, of my grandmother. I feel the echo of the ancestral string, a melody that refuses to be silenced, that demands to be heard. I learned that rejection is not the end, but often the necessary detour to find our true path. Sometimes, being ignored forces you to seek your own light, to create your own stage. And so, my violin continues to sing, carrying the story of the ancestral string, of my family, and of a young woman who, despite being ignored, found her voice and became the beacon of a legacy.